All right. Well, I want to say thank you for being here. I am jazzed to talk about the first 48 hours after death or, incapacitation, as is close to my heart based on personal experiences. I get to share this with you with my co-host, Allie Irwin. Allie is actually someone who I met on the Facebook over the years of following her. And I remember um, at some point I realized her husband had cancer. And at some point I realized he'd passed away. And at some point, I realized Allie is one in a zillion in her candor, her open heart, her willingness to share. I can't pretend to know her exact why, but I think to be a guide to others, to model what is possible. And then Allie is also fiercely funny on top of like we can talk about death and incapacitation all day, but also Allie is wicked funny. So I am honored to share. Mostly I'll be asking Allie questions and just sharing some of my personal anecdotes on the first 48 hours after something awful happens. And then of course the stages of grief, because Allie taught me that's not for the survivor. The stages of grief was created for the person dying. And for the person who will grieve the person dying, there's more.
We have something else.
We have something else. All right, Allie, will you introduce yourself and say hey to our current guests and our replay people?
I am Allie Irwin. I've been a coach for over a decade. I've coached on, everything, parent coaching, executive coaching, public speaking, lots of things. And so when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, like I came into the diagnosis with some skills that not everybody has, right? You get a traumatic diagnosis. And as a coach, I already had some tools in place. And then you fast forward, he was diagnosed in the beginning of June. And then he went into for a routine surgery in August and nearly died. Like really, really very nearly died. And I realized how wildly unprepared we were. Um, as a couple, we had been married 30 plus years, and we had done all the normal couple things where we kind of divided our responsibilities. And like, I didn't even know the password to his laptop. And so, in between all of the tearful, like, I love you, thank you for a beautiful life together. I mean, we were really that close to saying goodbye. I had to ask him, like, am I going to have to sell the house? Am I like, what is a password to your laptop? Like, what's the, just these really, really basic, stupid questions. And then we would go back to crying and saying, I love you. And then, like, what do I do with your car? Just these super stupid, basic, practical things that I didn't, we were completely unprepared on. So this topic is really near and dear to my heart because the, sorry, my brain is glitching because I want to go in so many different directions. Okay, this topic is really near and dear to my heart because there are specific things that you can do to be prepared for either Serena's situation where she effectively loses someone who is still alive on just a random car accident on a random Tuesday afternoon to someone like me that gets a diagnosis and has time. Those are sort of like the full spectrum. And the first 48 hours for both of us is sort of the same, even though our circumstances were pretty different. So that's sort of the intro.
Well explained. For anyone who's like, who is Serena? By the way, hi, I'm a coach. I've had the privilege of working with Allie, which is one of the reasons I was like, oh, let's do a training on this
Yeah.
because we have very different but similar in certain ways stories, and her work is very meaningful to me. My father was rear-ended by a FedEx truck in broad daylight and did not hit his head on anything, but as we age, our brain shrinks. So apparently the impact was enough for his brain to be slamming against the skull on the inside, which caused an 11 centimeter brain bleed. And then they did a surgery, and then he had 3 strokes upon waking. So he woke up from his surgery, and then he was unresponsive for 2 days, which is not a coma. It's literally unresponsive. And then he woke up and he was really cool. And then the brain injury took over, and he was not dead, but he was able to call Adult Protective Services and the police department to tell them that I was stealing from him, not true, and wrongly locked him up because part of his brain injury is he believes he's fine. He is not fine. He is unable to hold information for more than 7 minutes. But unfortunately, a part of his injury is he fundamentally believes he's wrongly locked up and can still walk, talk, chew gum, and it all proved very problematic. And one of the things that I'm practicing forgiveness and surrender is if I had known then what I know now, I could have spared me oceans of pain and suffering. And I do think Allie and I were talking, we were like, wait, we need our friends in the room about let's make a new standard. Do you want to share it? Let's make a new standard of what it means to be a responsible parent as it pertains to we're all going to die. And if you
Responsible parent, responsible partner, responsible sibling, responsible um, uh, daughter, like opening up these conversations about what is going to eventually happen to all of us so that we can take care of the people around us.
right,
And as children who are, I've lost both of my parents, like we can help them be responsible to not leave a mess for us to clean up. Like that we're trying to change sort of the standard of care around preparedness. That is a responsibility we have, just like getting car insurance and brushing our teeth and like all the other things that we think responsible adults do. This is part of it too.
can I just say I think this is a modern issue, by the way, because well, I think there's 2 issues, but one of them is like back in the day, don't make me pick a year, but back in the day, this was a given. If you had a certain amount of money or property, you absolutely had a will and you had a family, like you had a lawyer, and like this was a given. And it's interesting because I think it's almost a symptom of our modern times that we self-serve and do so many things on the internet and like get your own insurance, your own house, and like all these details that used to would have involved a lawyer and or business partner. And then even your example, Allie, of having a laptop being like, honey, what's your password? Nobody had a laptop. People had drawers with physical copies that if the lawyer didn't manage it, you could go open the drawer and figure things out. I think it's a very modern
It is a modern
situation
problem. Yeah.
that like now we
And
have all these
we used to have a more comfort with death, right?
also
We
that
didn't have the forever youth, forever, like I'll just take these vitamins and nothing bad will ever happen to me. Yeah.
also that that's a good point. It's also yeah, it's interesting because it's like, oh right, if you air quotes, but if you had a certain amount of money or property, it was a given you had your lawyer, you had your will, details were in order, and then we've been able to do so much individually on the internet and then have money that we've made this big glorious mess. So, should we start with the first? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so let's dive
Yeah,
into
let's dive into the fun.
so the first 48 hours, you can tell I'm very excited about this. So excuse me for interrupting. The first 48 hours are actually special. They are different than the time before and the time that will come after. And the reason that they're different is because when you have a shock like that, like our brains in general run on prediction, right? Like I predict how a chair is going to work, I predict how hot this is going to be. And when you have, like, when Serena's dad woke up, she had no frame of reference for what was happening. And so essentially, it's a form of shock. She's going into a form of shock. And even though, my husband was very ill, when it happens, like my husband had never died before. And so I didn't know what to do. My brain couldn't predict what the next steps were. And that is why those first 48 hours are really special. And a lot of this is based on The Worst Is Over. And it's such a good book that I'm like this far in. And I was like, I like this, this idea is about setting this first 48 hours up correctly. EMTs, trauma responders are already using, and it's something that we could be using in our lives as well. Okay, so you're extra suggestible because you're in shock and you're literally like, I don't know what to do here. You're more susceptible to what other people are telling you. So I'm guessing, Serena, in that hospital room, you were looking at the doctors like, what is happening? Like, what can I expect? Tell me what's going on. Who is this person? And for me, I'm like, I actually called my brother-in-law because even though we had picked out a funeral home, like I couldn't even think of the name of the funeral home in that moment because you're in shock. And so if you can plan ahead of who you're going to surround yourself with in those 48 hours, you can set yourself up both with the tools that you're going to need to get yourself through that shock period as intact as possible. And you can set up a plan so that you know what to do, that you just execute it.
Okay, I want to interrupt just to
Please.
underline that. Is everyone here a coach? Will you raise your hand if you're a coach? Okay, I was like, I knew we had a coach crew. Love the
Yes.
coaches. Coaches. We know this as coaches. This is like when I love the happy body dance. We're all coaches. We get it. This is I used to hate it. And don't worry, I don't do it. But at one point when health was a priority for me, I was meal planning. And I did come to the understanding of like, oh, the value is, especially on my crazy day, we're not making a decision. I said I was going to have this salad from Chipotle, no dressing. So when I'm juggling the 50,000 things, I had no decision to make. I only had a plan to follow. And while I do not subscribe to that for my day-to-day long term, I was like, oh, that's the value of the plan. And likewise, what Allie's talking about, that I'm like, oh, if I could fly back in time and I've given myself some sort of plan, some guardrails of you don't have to feel good. You don't have to feel confident. Just follow the plan that we made when we had access to the executive functioning part of our brain. That's what Allie's talking about. And that's when it's like so loving. It's not about even feeling good. It's about when we
Or
were
feeling anything.
right. When we
Yeah.
were sane and had an executive functioning brain, we made a plan. And so when we are in actual shock, it's just a matter of fumbling into the plan, find the plan.
And when it comes to big things like these types of shocks that we're talking about, making that plan so stupid simple and
Oh,
accessible. Like I said, we already had a funeral home picked out, and I literally couldn't find that piece of paper. And so I had to call my brother-in-law, just start over because my plan wasn't quite simple enough on the day that I needed it the most.
yeah.
You have to keep it stupid simple.
Well described. Stupid simple. That is the plan. Mhm.
Okay, who's heard of the 5 stages of grief? Okay, I'm going to explain the 5 stages of grief to you and Nevin, and then because it's such a common thing, especially in America, and then I'm going to explain what's better. So the 5 stages of grief are, I have them written down because I can never remember them. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And these are based on the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the 1960, late 1960s, on her interviews with people that were terminally ill. There was no work, no like work, psychology work. And so this was a huge breakthrough at the time to talk to terminally ill patients about what they were experiencing. And that is part of why the framework got so popular, is because there was such a void before that. And she was trying to normalize, like, hey, if you're feeling really angry, that's normal. If you're in denial, like maybe the doctor got it wrong, that's normal. She was normalizing all of those things. Where it went awry is because there was such a vacuum in the sort of world of the terminally ill and the world of grief that it just got applied to everything. And so surviving spouses or children, partners, they think that they are supposed to go through the 5 stages of grief too. And there's this idea that it's linear. And can you hear the problem with thinking that what you're going to go through is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance? Like, who can hear a problem with that?
I'm just thinking I got stuck in anger. I mean, anger.
It's totally fair. What have you got?
I mean,
Oh, it just sounds very neat. Very neat,
Yes.
as if we're all the same. And I know from my grief work that I've been all over the place. I thought I was in acceptance first, right? And then
Yeah.
I went to anger, depression, depending on which particular death it was.
Or
It,
even the hour of
yeah,
the day, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Tuesday you were super angry, and then maybe Wednesday you were depressed. And
yeah.
then Wednesday afternoon you were in acceptance, and then you were angry by Wednesday night.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's this idea that it's neat and that it's linear. And also, this is a part that really bothered me is they all suck. Like all of those things suck. It's just yuck, 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 terrible, fine. And there's also this goal-oriented sort of like, oh, I can't wait until I get to acceptance. And also the idea that acceptance is as good as it gets. Like, so I'm going to talk about what I experienced, and then I later found what I experienced the most when my husband passed immediately, and for the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks was just relief. He was gasping for air, and his skin was breaking down. He was trying so hard, and I was just, you can hear it in my voice. Like I was just so relieved that he was finally like at peace. And that doesn't fit into the model at all. And I did not run away from my feelings, but I also had a shit ton of work to do. American Express that first week started calling me like multiple times a day. And all of a sudden, all of my credit, like our main credit card that I was correctly titled on, we were both joint account holders. It was tied to our main bank account. Like everything was done correctly. They canceled out of the like blue sky because of a technicality in the way our account was set up that like literally wouldn't apply to anybody else. And so I had all these really practical things to do that I was totally capable of doing. And so in a more accurate, more modern model of grief is this idea that you kind of oscillate between it's called the dual process model, and you're oscillating between the loss orientation, all of those feelings, and the moving forward orientation, the like getting things done, going out for coffee with a friend, and you're oscillating back and forth. And so if that's the way that grief like actually is for the surviving spouse, then what can we do in those first 48 hours to facilitate that happening as quickly as possible? Not as quickly as possible, like we're in a rush to avoid anything, because part of that oscillation is processing all of your grief feelings, right? And it's the model is sort of, I imagine it sort of flowing back and forth. And so there isn't an endpoint in mind. I imagine that years from now, I will still have grief feelings. Like our kids will hit a milestone and I'll be sad. When my son announces his engagement, I will be sad that my husband isn't there. I'll be back in this part of the processing. Does that make sense to people? Yeah. Okay. So, how do we do that? We do that by uh, this half of the processing, right? The feelings processing. You guys are coaches. How do you, like, what's your favorite way to process your feelings?
Okay,
Let's
that's a
ask my team.
question that only
Yeah?
coach can ask a coach. What is your favorite way to process your feelings?
Well, we're all coaches here.
No, totally. I just love it. I was
For
just
you
thinking,
replay people, if you're not a coach, you are going to get a buffet.
yes, yes. For me, it's a sense of I need space. Something that I've noticed is certainly like if the calendar is packed or the responsibilities are packed, like processing my feelings is a theory. Like to actually sit either on the ground or in a chair or crisscross applesauce on the floor. Like I need to feel like I have 20 minutes. Doesn't necessarily take me 20 minutes, but I have noticed if I do not have space, time and space to like fall apart, it will not happen.
So, in those first 48 hours, it would be really important for you to clear your calendar, like to the extent that it's possible.
100%. I 100% I just lived at the hospital with my dad when it was
Yeah.
me. And that was in hindsight, that was actually like helpful. And I spent a lot of time with bare feet on the grass and then my back against a tree in the like parking lot of the hospital with the VA
Okay. So,
complex. And
grounding is
yes,
another way that you process your emotions.
bare feet on the ground, back against the tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Grounding in nature. So, that's mentally thinking of those things and putting them in your toolkit for your first 48 hours. When you, and because you're coaches, you probably have tools that you use regularly. And in those first 48 hours, you want to consciously be using those tools. So if there's something that you need to do to remind yourself to use those tools, that's part of your plan. Like if it's a sticky note in your bathroom, like that's part of your plan the first 48 hours. So I will share one of my favorite is havening. Are people here familiar with havening? Yes. Marina, your name is so small on my screen. Am I getting your name right, Marina?
No, Marlene.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
It is so small on my
Oh,
screen.
sorry.
Okay. So Marlene is also familiar with havening. This is the work I learned it through Doug O'Brien, and I cannot remember. Like I always think Rick Rubin, but that's not who came up with it. It's not who came up with it.
He came up with all sorts of cool stuff though. So it could, I'm like,
Uh, it is touch.
mm,
Havening is the idea of you want to be moving, Serena, not just the hug, but like the full touch and all the way down. We have all of these receptors in our hands. And so while you're going through what you're going through, you're sitting in the hospital room. I called a friend and we did a Zoom call and I havened for like a full hour, just a full hour, all the while I was talking about, and we weren't just talking about my husband's death. We were talking about she was at a conference and we were gossiping about the conference. And all the while we were gossiping about the speakers and who was there and all of that, I was using havening.
mm.
So that is a real for me that when I have like big trauma that I'm trying to keep moving, like even my own physical touch. Okay, who else has a technique that they use and you want to use these regularly? Nevin, do you have, or Lisa, do you have a technique that you regularly use when you're trying to keep your emotions moving?
I think I
Um,
walk.
Mm.
Perfect.
I go
Yeah,
for a long walk in the park. I like to look at water.
perfect. So like a
I mean,
lake
I
or a
mean, I have.
stream,
I
like
mean, there's
natural
like,
water.
yeah, like, I mean, I have all sorts of like pleasure tools in my toolkit. But when my dad died, uh, walking, being in nature.
Do you know why walking is so incredibly effective?
Mm,
Nerd
I've
girls trying
heard
to tell
about
you.
it, but I don't know. Like, I don't know the scientific explanation of that.
Walking is so incredibly effective because it uses both sides of your body. So anything
That's really
bilateral
cool.
stimulation, anything that uses both sides of your body uses more of your brain. And so that helps bring everything into sync. So while I teach bilateral stimulation, and this is my bilateral stimulation doc. And at many of the scary doctor's appointments, I would do this because I always have something in my purse. I don't always have the doc, which is lovely and unbreakable, but a chapstick, my AirPod case. One doctor's conference room we were in for some reason had ping pong balls. I don't know what the purpose of that was, but I just plucked a ping pong ball and all the while they were talking, and you can do it under the table. I could have been less obvious about it, but I was freaked out and I like that is something I could do in the moment to stay on that processing curve, to keep things moving. And in the first 48 hours, leaning heavily into the tools, making a plan to lean heavily into the tools keeps things moving. Because your urge is just going to be to like sit frozen.
Yep. And head down, head down. Like, what's the next problem? And like, wait for the next problem. And it's like, whoa.
Yeah. So if you can be out under a tree, if you can take like hear the news, go take a walk, if you can look at water, if you can haven. Marlene, was there one that you were going to
Um,
share?
you've used a lot of mine. I also walked, havened. If I have a ball or just a pen,
Yep.
I'll do that. I also practice Qigong. So if I'm already in a practice and something big is happening, I double down on my practice. And there's some ones that are like moving water, and that is like that bilateral stimulation. And
Yeah.
for me, I'm quite happy, not happy, but I will get down on all fours, indoors or outdoors, and do some like tapping. It looks kind of crazy, quite animalistic, but it's it's literally in that position like where you're on all fours, and I will just tap it. I will just tap my
Yeah.
feet, my hands. So it's really like being in my body. It's not like fancy yoga, although I do that. It's just like moving, like getting the energy moving
100%.
and having no embarrassment. Like this is what I need to do.
That
And you
part.
reminded me also tapping, EFT.
Oh yeah,
Great.
yeah, tapping. Yeah.
You know, hitting all, there's a million. And what you want to do is, as coaches, you want to use these tools so often that the day you actually need them, they're your first instinct. Like, no one told me to Haven.
Mhm.
I just got on a call with a coach friend and I just did it because that's what I had been doing all the time to process my stress. And sometimes when I felt almost like I was blacking out, like I would just karate chop, which is, just
Yeah.
part of EFT. And I couldn't even do all of EFT, but I could do something to keep that energy moving so that in those first 48 hours, you don't get stuck. And you don't get stuck in freeze and you don't get stuck in that like super suggestible state. The other thing that you want to have, does anyone have any questions about that, or should I shift to the other half? Is everyone good?
Yeah.
I want to ask you to give an example of the suggestible state because I can think of how that played out in my exact experience. But like you shared with me once, a neighbor coming over or people like bringing casseroles and telling you
How broken you feel. You're so broken right now, but one day you'll be happy. I know that you're shattered, but you'll probably marry again. Just over and over and over, people told me that I was like in a pit of despair. In, one day I would feel happy just over and over and over. And I had to really put up like energetic, like a puffer vest of energy because that isn't how I felt at all. And it was so well intended that I trained my brain to, you can see I'm like tucking my hair behind my ear so I can hear it better. I trained my brain to only hear their care. Like their words were the Charlie Brown voice of more, 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 more. And all I could hear is, oh, Sherry cares about me. Lori cares about me. Julie cares about me. And like I kind of tuned back into what they were saying, and they were still saying some like dark nonsense. And I just tuned right back out. Sherry cares about me. Sherry cares about me. Sherry cares about me. And then I would say, having heard almost nothing, that they said, thank you so much for stopping by. It means so much to me to have friends like you. Why? Because I genuinely had only heard that they care about me, but I did not take in any of their messages about how dark and broken I was.
I think that's so powerful, and it's something that I want to like interrupt to point out to people, not just the first 48 hours, but even the first few weeks, because so much of our social norms, especially as women and grieving and like how we're allowed to live. And my experience of Allie is that she gave herself permission, still does, to grieve, as she already said, like when her son gets engaged, she will miss her husband then again. Like, you know, she's not confused, but also you've given yourself permission to live, which obviously is what you and Kevin wanted, as in live, not, okay, first I will lose 2 years to not just grief, but also satisfy social norms. Giving yourself
Be
permission.
sad enough for my friends.
That's what I mean. Performative
Yeah.
and there's real social pressure. So it is revolutionary that you gave yourself permission and, as you said, used your coach tools to be like, oh, Claire cares about me. Jane cares about me. Like to receive the message, which is I care about you, not receive their own personal baggage, projections, and or fears. As
Yeah.
you said, like you're plenty broken, just fine. Don't need to be told, quote, you are broken, or to take on the idea that that looks a certain way, does a certain thing, or doesn't do certain
Yeah.
things. It's big.
100%.
Big.
Yeah, for sure. I have like a favorite spot in my house to cry. Like I'm not skipping the grief part. Like I have figured out the ideal spot in my house to cry because I've cried enough to have like sorted that out. But when I'm not sad, I don't pretend to be sad. And I, especially in those first 48 hours where you are suggestible about what you're going to feel, what you should do next. That brings me to the idea, and I'm keeping an eye on time, of ring theory. Who here has heard about ring theory of support? Yes. Do you want to explain it, Marlene, or do you want me to?
I can have a quick go, see if my
Yeah, let's
memory's
hear
still
it.
there. It's about the ring theory is about not just in the first 48 hours, but especially in the first 48 the weeks of an initial shock, it can be death or something else traumatic happening, is to keep like so the people who are specifically involved, they're the ones who you keep close. Um, and then we have like is it concentric layers of people.
So I am the
That-
center. When my
yeah,
husband
you said.
died, I am the center, and my kids, we're the innermost ring
Mhm.
because this shit happened to us.
Yeah.
And then even one ring out is like honestly most of the rest of the family. You know, his brothers, um, his mom might be in the center with us, but cousins, close friends, they're one ring out. And then out farther you go. His former bosses all called, they're like a couple rings out. And the really important thing is comfort in, dumping out. So no one hands me, the center of the circle, their sadness to deal with. And this is such a great practice because, again, the first 48 hours, you're going to be super stupid. And so you want to practice this in your everyday life so that it is a habit that you don't let people hand you their grief. I had a very, very lovely neighbor who just like so over the top wanted to help, and she can't manage she has no rein on her feelings at all, and wanted to just dump them all over me. And I didn't see her for maybe 7 months. It was just like never the right time because I got such a clear reading. And like if we were at a mutual, like a neighborhood party, I'd see her come and I was like, whoop, off to get a drink. Because she can't, like, I'm managing, no one dumps into the center ring about this. I'm not available to
Mhm.
comfort anyone that's not in the center ring with me. My kids, yes. Kevin's mom, yes. But even his brothers had to manage they could only comfort me.
Again, this is revolutionary, like as it should be, but especially in our modern times when we've lost ceremony and we've lost so much based on our like we can text, we can WhatsApp, we can like based on we're all
Yeah.
hyper available to everyone at all times. It's such a big deal, Allie. That is something that I hard failed in my experience. I was being dumped on and I was 100% back to my childhood role of I will take care of everyone in this room. And that hurt me. And to hear you be so clear in your my kids, our kids, me, and all right, his mother. But after that, every other adult will be responsible for managing their feelings because we're busy. It's so
Yeah.
fiercely loving. It's so it
It's
honors.
incredible. It's powerful. And I've done
Yes.
that recently with someone. I was at a funeral, but it was a cousin that I hadn't seen. And it's the first time she'd seen me since I like separated and got divorced. And she just came up to me and started crying. And I thought she was crying for the dead person. She was like, "No, but you've sold your house and you've left." And I was like, "Stop." Like I literally said, "Stop."
Good job.
Where are
Yeah, it
those
was.
heart emojis?
Yeah, because
Mhm.
also, as going back to what you said, Ali, I wasn't in that space. I wasn't sad. I wasn't, and so it's,
Right.
and I could literally feel the energetic dumping, and I actually said, "You're going to have to stop this because actually I'm fine and pull yourself together because it's that thing. It's not appropriate, but also reminding all of us that it's only people in the center, in like we are the center, and the habit of people think they're being caring actually by imagining and that you must be going through hell, so they're going to tell you that they are too for you. I'm just like, no need to do that. That's
And you can hear that suggestibility, that idea that you're going through hell. I don't
yes.
know, like from 9:15 to 9:45, you probably were, and then at 9:45, you got hungry and you made toast.
Mm.
And like understanding that things are going to be flowing through like grieving and functioning and grieving and functioning, as opposed to the idea of like sad time.
Mm. Yeah.
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 Let's
I,
see. I can't
can
read
I
that.
quickly can
Please.
I quickly share something? Like in the 48 hours of my or the first couple of weeks of my father's passing, which was natural death and all that, I think what was clear to me was like what is important right now and what is not important.
Mm.
Okay. That is the
So
perfect lean
and I
in. Go
and
ahead.
I went with that guidance, like friends called and things are happening, but for me in that moment was like funeral, me and my mom, that's the most important thing. The rest is I just let it slid away.
That's a perfect lead in to the second section is the idea of what is actually important in the first 48 hours, like what actually needs to get done. Because what was a surprise to me in our situation is how quickly I had to make important decisions. So there wasn't nothing that needs to happen in the first 48 hours. And maybe if I had a different life, like maybe there would have been someone here that would have made all those decisions for me, but like that's not my nature. And luckily, we had set up because we had so much time after he nearly died. The first time we had almost a full year, we decided everything ahead of time. And so those first 48 hours, I knew what needed to be done. And then I just did that. And like you said, let the other things slide. And it isn't like stuff slid very far from me. Like I said, American Express started calling me the minute they filed for a death certificate in the United States. American Express knew, and they were shutting that account down. And I'm not even saying that that's wrong. Like that probably is how they prevent fraud.
It's the same in
I,
Denmark. Yeah.
pardon?
It's the same in Denmark.
Yeah,
Like as soon as a person dies, oh yeah, everything shuts down.
but I was unprepared for what that was going to actually feel like. Like I didn't know that that was going to happen, that I was going to lose. They shut down all of his online accounts. I literally couldn't log in. And so any business expenses that I had on that card, just because we were out and that's the card I had with me, I didn't have access to that for documentation. I had to figure out a workaround for that. There's not nothing to do in those first 48 hours. And even when you just do those things, some other things don't slide very far. So having a plan laid out of what needs to get done, Serena has a beautiful story from her grandmother who literally planned everything for her family to the nth degree. And I had text messages like from my husband planning, this is what I want in the funeral. Like, this is the food I want. This is the music I want. This is the style I want. This is what I want done with my life insurance. We had planned all of those things. So while I was at my least capacity, I didn't have to make any decisions. I just had to follow the plan that we had set up.
Which is something that I don't know that we remember, and maybe everyone on this live call, but maybe you listening on the replay. Part of what was so valuable about my grandmother had every detail, right down to the preacher who was probably 40. So my grandmother was 98 when she died. He said, this is the first time I've done a funeral like this. The reading, who would speak, the poem they would read before they added their own commentary. Allie and I laughed. She had it that I followed her casket in to the service and followed her casket out. And I was like, she's totally nodding at Princess Diana, and the boy is walking behind the casket in case anyone's confused. She's totally like, look sad, walk behind. Got it. But as someone grieving, it was,
I heard look beautiful, walk behind.
I
But
mean,
maybe
thank
both
you.
are true.
Also that, but I was like a little bit of drama, Grammy. I'm into it. I just wanted to do right by her. We all did. Those of us grieving, we just want to do right by our loved one, and to have explicit directions was such a gift. This is what Grammy wanted.
Why was it a gift, Serena?
Because I didn't have to think and I didn't have to guess. And as a family, we weren't fighting because as Allie knows, at some point, somebody asked me, can you be a pallbearer? And I was like, no, I'm doing what Grammy wanted. And there was no fighting because Grammy had it written down. So we didn't have a fight over this would be better. It was a question they asked. And when I deferred to her original plan, everybody was content to say, yes, okay, we will follow her original plan. And there was no argument about what song. There was no argument about where. There was no argument about what poems. True story, she had her tombstone made when I was in college, literally well over 20 years ago. Like literally, she was like, and when I die, you put the end date. That's it. So to Allie's point, there was no argument about why are there grapes on her tombstone? Because she wanted them. Because that's what she paid for and had put in the late 90s.
And that plan, that first 48-hour plan, can extend to who gets called in the first 48 hours. I didn't, Kevin and I had put together a list he put together a list of who needed to be called. And it included some people, like some old bosses that he was still close to, because that was a man who loved his job. But they don't need to be called in the first 48 hours, right? Like we had a plan. This is who needs to know in the first 48 hours. Like, I'm going to call this person and they're going to let this group of people know. I'm going to call this person and they're going to let this group of people know. And then we had stepped out like over sort of the first week. I was going to let these other people know. And then I was going to put it, like the sort of social media, more public announcements to like more casual friends. But that first 48-hour plans includes all of the basic things like, are you an organ donor? What funeral home do you have? In the case of Serena's dad, if he was still working, like she would have needed access to who his employers were so she could call and say, that he wasn't going to be able to come to work at least
Forever.
the next foreseeable, like in the next month, because he would at least be in rehab while they're figuring out, what's going on. And so having those things written down and accessible to the people that you love takes the burden off them because they literally, we had iPhone notes for some of this because that was an easy way he could think of something and just put it in our shared note. And then afterwards, I literally line by line knew what to do, who to call, and what to do, for his funeral because he'd written it down. And again, when my brain was like so just overwhelmed and sad and confused and tired and all of the emotions, to not have to think about what food, it made a huge difference.
Okay. We're almost at time. So something that I had to say anyways.
Right. I just
Marlene.
need to turn my screen brightness up.
Oh, there you go. Marlene, I think you're a new friend in my world. I love, love, love talking about money and finances endlessly. So I want to talk about the money thing because taking time out to work with Allie and or separately lawyers to put together a trust or a will. I'll tell you right now, my dad never bothered with that because there was conversation about that before his car accident. He had a cancer situation and I was like, hey, dude, you're 83. Possibly you're going to die in 30 years. May we get your affairs in order? And I promise you, his reason not to was he thought he was saving money. And my whole life, this man is a retired truck driver. Truck drivers are paid decent in the United States. It's not a glamorous or high paying position. He bought a house, bought land, paid it off, 0 credit cards, 0 debt. And my whole life, you will inherit this. This land is your land. And when I would bring it up, he's like, well, you're my only living child, so you'll inherit it. That is not true, my friends. To clarify, I spent tens of thousands of dollars, plural, on a lawyer that mostly gave me migraine headaches and stress and pain. His lawyers, who have now taken over for my mental and financial well-being, bill at $600 an hour. And so I was crunching the numbers. That's more than the usual rate. I was looking at public records and found out she's billing at $450 plus $150 guardian fee, which is legal and approved. So by my basic math, between whenever he dies and when she started, which was last July, she's going to bill like $60,000. And I will not inherit the house or land because in the state of Texas, without a will, everything will have to be liquidated. And my late brother has children who will inherit half, and I will inherit the other half. And if we could fly back in time and Allie could explain to my dad, dude, you could work with me for X amount of money, which he would be like, that's so much money. And everything you want would be protected. And your daughter, who, only living child who you love very much, will be exponentially better off. He would have said yes. He had no idea. And so the thing that I have to say live and on the replay, this is like one of those classic times where investing dollars and hours now probably saves your loved ones at very least 10x. And I am being conservative. In the case of my father, if he'd spent $2,000 on a lawyer and wrote a will, probably I would be inheriting over $500,000 at some point. And as it currently stands, probably I will inherit about 50,000 after everything is liquidated and done. Part of that being the guardian is basically, recently I found out she's wanting to sell his land for 1/4 of what it was for sale for recently. And she was like, well, the buyer told me. And I'm like, what do you mean the buyer told you it was only worth 1/4? Like, this is what I'm paying $600 an hour for? I'm not paying. My point being, it's so easy to think I'm going to save money and deal with it later. And it's so quick to be an exponential gift or loss to the people we love the most. Marlene.
Yeah, seeing as this is a recording, I wanted to sort of piggyback on that and say, like, when my mum was dying, and she had Alzheimer's. So I was the only one who was like, she's dying. There is no other way. I took on that role of getting everything. Her funeral was organized 2 years before. I had a folder for each of my four sisters with every single step of what needs to be done, from contacting the bank or whatever. That's one side. But also, I forced my dad to get his affairs in order because he was like, yeah, you girls will sort it out when I die, da da da. And I had to go into what I call hyper boss bitch mode.
HBBB.
Yeah, and I'm just I'm reflecting on it because I wasn't a coach then, but I just knew in my bones what I needed to do. And he came kicking and screaming, and all of his affairs are now like in order. There's six kids, one had died, so the mess, I just all I could see that it was going to be a damn mess. And also, our parents, if it's a parent, often don't understand. So, your dad saying you're his only living child, that makes, when it's intestacy, that means nothing if your brother had children. It's going to be divided up. So, getting information and having the hard conversation, like really tough. It was tough, but I stood my ground. So I'm kind of proud of myself now,
I'm proud of you.
especially. And I share that with everyone. Like, do not leave it. Do not wait, because we never know. Like, we don't know. And my dad now is the biggest advocate. Like, anyone who's over like 60 is like, have you got your affairs in order? Like, so now he can relax.
And you can.
And I can.
And
And
it's
I
a
can
love
too.
letter to his kids
Yes.
that it's set up.
Hmm.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
you wrote the love letter, but it is a love letter to your siblings that it's all set up.
Yeah.
And to Marlene. Like you set
Yeah.
you up for like when this awful thing happens, I'm free to grieve and follow the instructions and follow everything I
Yeah.
put in place.
Yeah. And
It
everybody,
will-
like everything, the way he wants it, that's the way it's going to be. We've got a half sister. If he died, she would have got nothing. He said, no, but he didn't know that's how it works. It's like, no, it's not your child. So now he gets exactly what he wants. But we needed to have that really tough conversation, but also with a lawyer present to say, actually, Mr. M, this is how the law works. It's not the way you'd want it to be. So what do you want? Let's make it legally tight. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big
So
yes.
that work is exactly what I do inside Treasure Map. That work is step by step. We put together a plan from the first 48 hours out through the settling of the estate, with everything from all of your accounts, the assets, notifying, like I said, friends. If you are in a partnership, centralizing the knowledge that you and your spouse have together. So, I said in my family, we had sort of divided and conquered the tasks, but centralizing, if something had happened to me, he would understand who to call to fix the furnace. And if something happened to him, like I knew what all of our bank accounts were. And down to what you want done with your social media. There's a surprising racket of people hacking social media accounts, and then, all of a sudden, your dad is sending everyone requests for money. And so there's a lot of tightening up what happens with your business if something dies, just getting all of those things in place in a plan that is so apparent to everyone around you that if something happens to you, they know which folder to go to. Mine is clearly over there. If you are interested in Treasure Map, if you are interested in hearing more about what a supported walk through all of the areas of your life is, I'm at allieirwin.com. And the first step is to book a call and we talk about your specific situation. I offer Treasure Map in a 2-day experience where I fly to your house. We get the whole thing done in 2 days. To one-on-one sessions, private. We do it privately over the course of several months. And part of the benefit of that is both of those tiers is a lot of support in having those really difficult conversations. We talk a lot about how to get people on board who are not on board. How to make it accessible for people who are not comfortable with this topic. And then in the fall, we'll be offering this as a group program because there is a benefit to groups too from learning. You even heard it on today's call, how different people have different ways of thinking about things, and there's a benefit to doing things in a group. So if it's interesting, and I hope it is, you can check me out at allieirwin.com.
Shameless backing up of Allie of this. It's obviously near and dear to my heart. I love my dad very much. And I know he had no idea what he was doing by not doing certain things. And then my grandmother passed away just last October, and just 180 degrees difference.
Look at the smile on her face. Like, that's the difference.
And they both loved me. Like, you know, I'm not like,
It's
oh,
same
it's
amount.
like,
Yeah.
it's just that and also she did this decades earlier, which is what the young preacher was cracking up. He was like, oh, she'd come in every few years to update this stuff. Just an entirely different final lived experience. And also, again, honoring. I know my grandmother's wishes were honored, and, you know, my father no longer has a say in anything based on everything that didn't happen. But at the end of the day, I promise you, he would lose his mind if he knew somebody was billing $600 an hour to do what I did for months for free. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's because you failed to put the paperwork in place, which is what it is, but also it is not necessary. So I encourage anyone who has any inkling to talk to Allie, because again, it's near and dear to my heart. And I love that there's the 3 different options. For some people, like, I'm the kind of girl who's going to need an in-person 2-day just sprint. That's how it works in my world. But for others, there's the opportunity for 6 months of beauty online. And then, of course, there's the group program. I cannot let you go without telling you, I just announced a new group program that currently includes a bonus of private coaching. It is called 3P. We are centering peace, pleasure, and prosperity. I am a life and business coach. All I'm interested in at this time, and probably for the duration of my time on the planet, is peace, pleasure, and prosperity. There's no exact number. Those are both concepts. Excuse me. All 3 are concepts, not both. And this is what I am obsessed with. I'm at serenahicks.com. I hope you'll check that out. And thank you guys for being here. And thank you guys for being brave and admitting you and people you love are going to die. So maybe we should do the tiniest bit of planning so that when we experience the inevitable grief, there's more room for the clean grief and love.
So that both of those things can keep happening. You can grieve and you can get new credit cards, and you can grieve and you can make toast. Yep.
You can grieve and not rage at the $600 an hour rate that you discovered on the internet. Yeah. Rage. I love it. And back in the anger phase. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
all of you watching on the replay, our heart goes with you as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, ladies. Bye.
Bye.